a car full of children and them saying, well, they shouldn't have brought their kids.
Right, right. Well, the thing that's horrible about that is the horrible but maybe inevitable is that we're just not wired to kind of understand the consequences of our actions once we can fight war remotely. You know, it's just, I mean, if we were just fighting if it was all just, you know, bayonets, there's there's the kind of the inescapability of the horror of war. But the moment you can fly something, you're sitting in your office park outside of Las Vegas, and you're flying a Predator drone 13,000 miles away. It's I'm not suggesting those guys don't have a hard time sleeping at night. Some of them, but it's a very different kind of violence. And one of the scariest things about technology is that it uncouples us from our emotions from the reality of the consequences of our actions, so that the most harmful things aren't actually the most disturbing things. You know, so if you, this is an example actually I used in I think The End of Faith. You know, if you hear that your grandfather fought in World War II and he dropped bombs, he was a bomber pilot and he dropped bombs over Dresden. That's one kind of level of abstraction of his actions that it doesn't really disturb you about him, and it needn't have disturbed him. And he's at 30,000 feet dropping bombs, not really getting what he's doing. But if you hear Granddad killed a woman and her kids with a shovel, all of a sudden he's the scariest guy you've ever heard of, and probably couldn't sleep for the rest of his life either, because it takes a very different kind of person to do that. But the guy dropping bombs killed far many more women and children than the guy with the shovel, and so that
it's fascinating, isn't it? And then now we're moving into drones.
Yeah,
which moves even more.
So we need the burden is to figure out how to have an appropriate emotional response to reality, and to be guided by. It's not to say that our emotions are always the perfect guide. I mean, there may be ways in which we are wired to have a strong response to something that we should just get over, and we're not wired to have an appropriately emotional response to something that really is a massive danger. And so our perception of risk and our perception of harm is not what it needs to be for us to make intelligent decisions and compassionate decisions in these kinds of conflicts.
Did you agree with the video being released? Did you think it was a bad idea? For morale,
it's hard to separate that from everything else that has happened. But
as far as WikiLeaks, you mean?
Yeah. So I think WikiLeaks. Truth is, I don't even know the ultimate consequences of WikiLeaks. It would just matter what the consequences actually are.
Isn't transparency good?
Yeah, but
up to a certain point.
But do I think Obama should be forced at his next press conference to just share his White House briefing with the world? No. I mean, I think there are certain things that I understand that he and people like him need to know that I don't need to know, and if I knew and blogged about it, I would be harming our national security. So yeah, no, I'm not for the just unlimited
distribution of secrets.
Yeah.
So you allowed them to have certain secrets just for national security?
Well, it's just clearly they
need that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They absolutely need that. We would be paralyzed.
I agree with that 100%.
To what? Yeah, sure, absolutely, right. If there's bad guys, but to what level? Like at what point? How do you that's where it's weird. How do you make the distinction? How do you decide that they shouldn't be able to have certain secrets that may in fact be damaging to American civilians, or we might disagree with it. It might change the way we feel about a president or our policy.
It's probably not that complicated, though.
You don't think so?
No, it's probably pretty basic. It's probably like, all right, we should definitely not tell them about where nuclear warheads throughout the United States are located everywhere.
Yeah, you would think so, but I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, well, again, there are trade-offs between some of these things where it's just it's hard to really be satisfied that you've hit the right answer, because so for instance, going through security in the airport, there's this issue of fairness, and there's this issue of intelligent use of attentional resources. So the fairness would say, yes, frisk the 75-year-old woman who looks like she just got out of her evangelical church just as much as you frisk the guy who just prayed on his knees to Mecca before passing through security. It's only fair to be blind to those otherwise salient differences between them. But it's stupid, too, when you know that the person who's going to blow himself up on the plane is a jihadi and not an ordinary-looking old woman. Again, what are the consequences of being starkly unfair? Where you just profile nakedly and say, yes, without apology, we profile. If you're Muslim, we are going to subject you to a harrowing search at the airport because we're worried about your brothers. We have to find a balance. We're struggling to find a balance between those two things, and I think we're in the current environment. I think we're wise to err on the side of being fair, and I think you would want us to err in that direction, to be fair and to be transparent and to be, but that's what's so scary about something like nuclear terrorism. One thing has to happen, and all of a sudden we'll all be desperate for a level of security that will radically transform our lives. And it'll be, again, it could be completely out of scale with the actual damage. So, if a nuke went off in Los Angeles and killed 100,000 people, right? So a small nuke killed 100,000 people and rendered some area uninhabitable for a while. That would be such a rattling event that we would all be demanding huge changes, and we would be forfeiting our civil liberties happily with both hands.
As was clearly evident after 9/11. After 9/11,
right? But this would be orders of magnitude worse, and yet it would be rational to say, well, listen, 400,000 people died of heart disease last year. No one is forfeiting their civil liberties or going nuts over that figure. We're talking about 100,000 people what is the real risk we're talking about?
Well, there's a sudden death over a long,
and there'd be no
slow,
way,
self-administered death.
Even if that would be, even if I'm not saying that's the right way to look at it, but even if you could show a commensurate body count from some other source, actually Bill Maher once made this point, where I think he was talking about Hurricane Katrina. He said, well, look at what happened with Hurricane Katrina and the billions of dollars in cost and 1,000 lives lost. If a terrorist had done this, we would completely freak out as a nation. Because it's the weather, we basically can't get our act together and don't really worry about it. That difference in response is something we have to be cognizant of, and so one rational reason to want to protect against certain especially salient events like nuclear terrorism is because we are guaranteed to overreact in such a way that the consequences will be horrendous. Just economic consequences.
That's a very good point. So your point is cut back on civil liberties so that we don't have to cut back on them in the future when the shit hits the fan.
Well, to some degree,
it's an argument.
Yeah,
you're not committed to it, but it's an argument.
Yeah, no, but cut back on them. And again, I wouldn't phrase it in terms of cutting back on civil liberties, but it comes back to moments like airport security for me. It's like, how much security do I want when I get on an airplane? I want intelligent security. Now, and I also want fairness, and I'm willing to put up with a certain level of inconvenience to know that basically this is being done sanely. Now, do I want huge inconvenience? Do I want to be bombarded with X-rays? Do I want to, do I want to have to take my clothes off every time I get on a plane? No, but it's just. We have to, as a society, there's something very corrosive about the signs that these efforts are ineffectual and not being done intelligently. If we could all just see an airport security protocol that just looked right, where it's just, then I think everyone would understand why we had to do it. But it looks so wrong, and it feels so wrong, and
doesn't feel like it's improving.
It's just
it's not like they're figuring out the system better, and this is an easier way to do it, less intrusive. There's no easier way to do it.
And I'm not even putting myself. It's like I'm not. Fine. I don't actually look. I don't think I look like I'm Al Qaeda, but I don't look. I'm not as benign. I mean, I once saw a little girl when we first got the shoe bomber effect, and we were all having to take off our shoes. I saw a 3-year-old girl in her whatever those what are those black and white shoes that little girls wear are called?
Jellies. Uggs.
I don't know. There's some older school name. Anyway, she was like holding up a line. She was being forced to take her shoes off. She was terrified. It was like her first flight, and like the parents were being traumatized. And it was just the most insane misapplication of human resources. And meanwhile, that was a flight where I had accidentally taken a bag that I used to keep a gun in. And I went through security with a double handful of bullets, just inadvertently, right? So I'm getting through with bullets, and they're looking at this girl like she's she's Al Qaeda.
Al Gore got frisked. Do you remember that?
No, but
Al Gore made a big deal out of it because he was flying commercial on one of these flights, and he got frisked. It was like, what the fuck, man? How ridiculous is that?
That's a symbolic demonstration of fairness, yeah.
Yeah, it is, I guess. At a certain point in time, though, you go, come on, you think the ex-vice president is going to become a suicide bomber? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah. So it's that kind of thing that I think is corrosive. And the missteps and failures we've had at the level of foreign policy and in fighting wars have been corrosive for the same reason. It's just the ineptitude and the unacknowledged and unanticipated costs, and it's all just it's very hard to be idealistic or feel like anything is being done right. But again, think of just what Obama's got to deal with when he drinks his first cup of coffee in the morning. They're getting information from a world of intelligence which is struggling to quantify certain risks, and there is no question that there are people who are desperate to blow up whole cities in this country not because they have said they have a long list of rational grievances against our foreign policy, but because they're fighting a cosmic war, and that's just something we have to absorb, as bizarre a fact as it is.
So you think for most people it's almost impossible to sort of understand their mindset, to really put yourself into their shoes? It's virtually impossible to really have that kind of a crazed.
I don't find it actually. Belief. I mean, I feel like I can put myself in their shoes. If I read the Quran and I read the Hadith and I read what people like Osama bin Laden say about their intentions and why they're doing what they're doing. You watch a few suicide videos, Last Testament videos of suicide bombers. You just have to imagine what it would be like if you really believed that this was the structure of the universe, where this human life that people like us really value is just this irredeemable, fallen, really revolting circumstance of separation from God, and it's just this anteroom to the better place that you get into if you live this way and die in the right way at the right time, and eternity awaits. Eternity where all the good people get to be happy forever awaits. Now, why would you want to stick around here?
I have to talk about this more, but I also have to pee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my headphones down, and I'm going to ask you a question when we get back, though. How the fuck does anything get fixed? How do we fix this? If you were the grand social engineer of the universe, think about that, and I'll be right back.
I will follow you. So now what do we do while you pee?
Brian will talk to you.
Okay.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay.